Can you talk about the Crooked Hillary campaign and how it developed?
Absolutely. So this started as a super PAC that was built for Ted Cruz, Keep the Promise One, which was run by Kellyanne Conway and funded by the Mercers. That was then converted to becoming a super PAC for Donald Trump. They tried to register with the Federal Election Commission the name Defeat Crooked Hillary, and the FEC luckily did not allow them to do that. So it was called Make America Number One. This super PAC was headed by David Bossie, someone that you might remember from Citizens United, who basically brought dark money into our politics and allowed endless amounts of money to be funneled into these types of vehicles so that we don't know where all of the money is coming from for these types of manipulative communications. And he was in charge of this campaign. Now, on that 2-day-long debrief that I talked about, and if you want to know more, you can read about it in my book, they told us...
Wait, and explain where you were and who was in the room.
So I was in New York in our boardroom for Cambridge Analytica's office on 5th Avenue, and all of our offices from around the world had called in to videocast. And everybody from the super PAC and the Trump campaign took us through all of their tactics and strategies and implementation and what they had done. Now, when we got to this Defeat Crooked Hillary super PAC, they explained to us what they had done, which was to run experiments on psychographic groups to figure out what was working and what wasn't. Unfortunately, what they found out was the only very successful tactic was sending fear-based scaremongering messaging to people that were identified as being neurotic. And it was so successful in their first experiments that they spent the rest of the money from the super PAC over the rest of the campaign only on negative messaging and fear-mongering.
And, I would beg to say that what's happening is we're getting insight to the network of the influence industry, the buying and selling of information and of people's behavioral change. And it is a completely unregulated space. And what's very worrisome is this, as we're seeing more and more with what Emma's talking about and Brittany's shown, is this conveyor belt of military-grade information and research and expertise coming out of our defense work that's being paid for by our tax money, then going into the private sector and selling it to the highest bidder with different special interests from around the world. So what you see in the files is, a oil company buying influence campaign in a country that it's not from and having no responsibility or anything to what it's doing there, and what happens in that, the results of that research, where it gets handed over to, no one knows. Any contracts that then result in the change that happens on the political ground, no one tracks and sees. So this is what we're very concerned about, is because you're seeing that everything has become for sale. And if everything is for sale...
Our elections are for sale.
Exactly. And so how do we have any kind of integrity to the vote when we're living in such a condition?
Democracy has been broken, and our first vote is happening in 28 days, and nothing has changed. No election laws have changed. Facebook's a crime scene. No research, nothing has come out. We don't understand it yet. This was why we felt so passionate about making this film, because it's invisible. How do you make the invisible visible? And this is why Brittany is releasing these files, because unless we understand the tactics which are currently being used again, right now, as we speak, same people involved, then we can't change this.
Facebook's a crime scene. Jahan, elaborate on that.
Absolutely. Facebook is where this has happened. Initially, we thought this was Cambridge Analytica, right? And that Cambridge Analytica was the only bad player. But Facebook has allowed this to happen. And they have not revealed. They have the data. They understand what has happened, but they have not revealed that.
And they have profited off it.
And they have profited off it.
Well, it's not just that they've profited off it. I think what's even more worrisome is that a lot of our technology companies, I would say, are incentivized now by the polarization of the American people. The more polarized, the more you spend time on the platform checking the endless feed, the more you're hooked, the more you're glued, the more their KPI at the end of the year, which says number of hours spent per user on platform goes up. And as long as that's the model, then everything is designed from the way you interact with these devices to the way your news is sorted and fed to you to keep you on as hooked as possible in this completely unregulated, unfiltered way. Under the guise of freedom of speech when it's selectively there for them to protect their interest further. And I think that's very worrisome. And we have to ask these technology companies, would there be a Silicon Valley if the ideals of the open society were not in place? Would Silicon Valley be this refuge for the world's engineers of the future to come reimagine what the future could look like had there not been the foundations of an open society? There would not be. Yet the same people who are profiting off of these ideals, protecting them, feel no responsibility in their preservation. And that is what is so upsetting. That is what is so criminal. And that is why we cannot look to them for leadership on how to get out of this. We have to look at the regulation. You know, if Facebook was fined $50 billion instead of $5 billion, I guarantee you we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. It would have led to not only an incredible change within the company, but it would have been a signal to the entire industry. And there would have been innovation that would have been sponsored to come out of this problem. Like, we can use technology to fix this as well. We just have to create the right incentivization plan. I have belief that the engineers of the future that are around can help us get out of this. But currently, they are not the decision makers, because these companies are not democratic whatsoever.